Hi everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn, and I'm here with Stephen Grace. Hey Stephen, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you for coming back on. I think, how long was it? A couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, we had you on. I think it was.
It's been weeks.
Time is relative.
I missed you
at this stage. I missed you too. It's great to have you back on. Let's have a little bit of music. It's Friday over here, Friday morning. And we're going to continue our mocking up your work. Mighty Real Fakes. Fake it till you make it. Fake it when you can't make it. Fake it when you can't get outside series. Yeah, it's great to have everybody hanging out with us. So we're live on behance.net/live. We're also on YouTube, but if you want to jump in, ask questions, say hello, come up with any mocking up puns, please join us over at behance.net/live. We love a good pun. In fact, for a very short period of time, I was sharing studio space with Christopher Doyle Co, and Stephen works there, and I thought I was good at puns until I worked there, and that was some next level puns were happening. Christopher Doyle.
We had to get out. We were like, nah, get on our level or get out. That's...
Which is why I had to leave. Actually, Chris tapped me on the shoulder and he's like, "Your game is weak, son."
Oh, that is brutal.
It's true. Hey, everybody in chat. R&B Festus is here. Great to see you guys. Johanna, I think I saw a wild Johanna down there too as well, which is awesome. We're gonna have a bit of fun today. Here for about 90 minutes. And for those who may have missed and don't know who Stephen Grace is, you should by now. We were just talking about that. How about we check out a bit of Christopher Doyle work before we jump in again, just so those who don't know can know.
Absolutely. So I have pulled up the website here. So we are a creative studio in Sydney, and there's 5 of us. Christopher Doyle, which comes as no surprise, is the namesake, and he's a creative director. And then there's a few designers. There's me, Josie, Emily, and Wilson. And the sort of work we do is a mix of branding and campaign work. A view of our sort of projects and the things we do. Some art stuff, some Spotify, which we enjoy writing on those aforementioned puns. And then a mix of, small to medium business in Australia as well. I will dive into a Spotify job that we did for them in 2018. Mixing, I guess, copywriting and design for them, sort of capturing the year in music and the year in politics and culture. And this is a good example of some of the mock-ups, I guess, that we're going to sort of have a look at today as well.
So are these all fake that you're showing us here?
They are all fake, yeah. They look mighty real, but they are fake.
I'm just going to have to do this. I love Chris, but I love this. Like, we've got to have a chat today, and he's calling me right now.
That's perfect.
Amazing. Amazing.
Sorry, I did flick back. I think we got a little spiral in. A bunch of different paste up textures or billboard sort of mock-ups, and this can be a mix of stuff. So this was actually shot in Sydney, and we did get a photographer out to shoot these down, that's down Pitt Street Mall earlier in Sydney. But there's a whole mix of stuff. Can be from purely texture based, or there might be sort of supplied photos like these ones we've sort of comped together from multiple photos. So I guess there's a bunch of different ways that you can make them, and which is some of the things we're going to look at today as well.
Yeah, awesome. I'm just going to drop a link into the last mock-up that we did as well. So again, the chat we're using today is over at Behance. behandsnet.net/live. So I'm just dropping it in. If you did miss it, bookmark that one. Watch this one today. You don't have to watch that one to watch this one. But if you want to learn more, we went through a lot. There was lots of tips in there to make things look real. A lot of stuff that you probably wouldn't expect, like from the outside in. Like you really have to try to make it look a little bit gritty, like a little bit. You don't want it to be too perfect, because if it's too perfect, your mind just tells you it's fake. So one of the biggest things I picked up from you last time was like the subtle, like the subconscious of it. Like you kind of need to look at it really quickly and just not think that it's fake. I think that's one of the main things.
Totally. Yeah. There's all the little, I guess, touches to grade it a little bit to make it look like it is in the real world, and it came out of a camera. Otherwise it can just feel like vector graphics sort of inserted into a space, which just isn't how we perceive things out of the real world. We got to try and like mimic some of the lighting, some of the distortion that you get from camera as well. So we'll go over some of that again today. But yeah, definitely the first one we went into that in really good detail.
Great. Okay, cool. Well, we can get started. What do you have in store for us today?
So today I have a photo that I actually got from Unsplash, which is a really great resource if you are looking for sort of royalty-free stock imagery. There's loads of stuff on here, and you can get just a whole range. I mean, there on the front page is a laptop, although that might be an ad. However, it would make a cut. But there's loads of stuff on here that range like a whole lot of stuff. But then you can also get a lot of like really specific like device or billboard photography. So I've just grabbed a billboard from here, but there's loads of stuff on here that is royalty free, which can be great, especially if you're a student and don't necessarily have a budget to spend on sort of mock-ups or stock photography. So this one came from here. I did point out Spotify earlier, but this is not our work. But it would be great to have this huge corner space somewhere in New York, above a Subway and a Hooters. Apologies.
It's the dream. Who needs Times Square when you can be above a Subway and a Hooters?
The Holy Trinity. And so this is what we're going to work towards. So taking over this space and putting in mock-ups that we can reuse as well. A big part of what we talked about in the first one is having building these with smart objects where you can actually replace the art over time, and it's not something you need to like keep rebuilding every time from scratch. We often can reuse some mock-ups that we've created, and the more time you spend online, you do see the same mock-up sort of circulating. There's a particular tote bag that I think every designer has used in their time.
Right.
So I don't think there's any problem with sort of recycling those single-use mock-ups. So
yeah, I think I remember this like back in the day when you used to keep your resources on a USB drive. I remember there was like one particular bus stop. It was like an Australian bus stop. I think it might have been down at Circular Quay or something. And I think every student, every graduate like had that in their portfolio, because it was like a Photoshop file that someone had created. It just got passed around and it looked exactly the same.
Yeah, there are a few that have they're like, it's the sisterhood of the traveling mock-up. They just all get switched around, which is another like argument for making your own as well. Taking like photos that you find online, or even like if you shoot some, I guess in the real world, you can actually make your own. And I have got that as well. If we have time to actually talk through, I took this photo this week just on my way home. And thought it could be like a good example as well of how we could like grade this and also then make it a live mock-up as well. So if we get time, we'll look into that as well. But it could be, it's a great argument for creating your own, just so you have your own, that they're not all being shared around on one USB. So we're gonna look at this. I guess what makes this one complicated is sort of the angled, like the perspective, of those two sides as well. So previously in the first round of mock-ups when we were talking about it, we were just making like a front-on mock-up, and that's, I guess, fine because all you've done is put it in and then you're, adding sort of lighting effects. What makes this one obviously a little bit more complicated is that we are now working to perspective. So we're gonna have a look at that, and then also have a little look at the grade as well on the photo. So this is sort of the finished one, but I will take us into the original photo. So first thing, I guess, with this photo is that it does have quite a strong grade on it. There is, because we've got it from Unsplash and it's, we haven't shot it ourselves, there's already been sort of a grading applied to this, which I find a little bit intense. And
so you mean potentially like a color grade, like a treatment, like it's kind of been desaturated a bit, or?
Yeah, it's sort of been desaturated, and there's you can sort of see up in here, it's sort of quite dark, there's no whites in it, because it's kind of got this haze over it, sort of like the like a visco filter, that you get on iPhone. It's got one of those applied, which can be nice, obviously, on photos. I guess what makes it difficult in terms of a reusable photo is when it's sort of meant to live against other photography, or maybe in a case study. Sometimes if it changes too much, that can be a little distracting. So maybe just trying to bring it back to a sort of more neutral grade could be a good first step. So just to grade this one, we're going to use Levels, and Levels has a great little color correction sort of tool in it, which is actually these 3 eyedroppers here. And so what they do is they kind of reset all of the points in the image, so you can reset sort of the black point, the white point, and then a gray point as well. And what that helps is just to reorientate the colors. So at the moment this is looking quite blue, there's a lot of blue in it, and so it probably needs to get more reds into it. What this does though is we'll reset that if we can sort of pick sort of the right areas to do this, and it's often the gray one that really helps here. So what we're looking for with each of these is to find the purest white, the purest black, and then the most balanced mid-gray, which I'll show you how we can sort of do that. So to find a white, I think around this sort of building there is a lot of white. There's some over here in this, but I might try and grab some just by zooming. So I've just grabbed some around here, which is sort of, you can see it's just sort of lifted that. And then a black point, I think up in here looks like really pure black, so we can grab that as well. And then for the mid-gray, I think there's a bunch of sky here which looks reddish, and then there's some over here which looks sort of blue. If you use your info tab, which you can get in the window, sort of drop down and in info, if you are hovering over here, you can actually see the RGB breakdown here. And I guess what you're looking for is that they're all semi-balanced around, actually where we are right now is quite good, sort of the 150s, because what that means is that they're actually all in the middle range of each of those RGB all go from 0 to 255. So if you're somewhere in the middle range of that, and that could be 125 to 150, then that's kind of good. I guess you're not looking for any that's too overbalanced into one territory, otherwise then it will have that effect, I guess. So
that's a really great tip. It's not often that we see the info tab being busted out on Adobe Live, I've got to say.
Yeah, this is my little my tool belt just of the info tab. So and so it's really subtle, but I think it just helps lift it, and it brings a bit more contrast back into it. The original one to me felt a little washed out, there's this hue over it that's a little intense, whereas it is obviously a grade A as well, so that doesn't help it massively, but I feel it's just you've kind of got a little more contrast in it. It can just be really helpful to try and undo a bit of that grade. It's just brought a little bit of that life back into it. To undo it. It can be a tough one, but it can, if you can find those really pure spots to eyedropper it, you can just it will really bring the image back into maybe how it was more realistically shot. So definitely one to to try. You could add in some other sort of color balance as well if you wanted to sort of like tweak some of those. So if it's like feeling a little too.
When you were using the color dropper to select like the white and then the black, can you manually enter in those values, or do you have to use the dropper?
Do you have to use the dropper? You do have to use the dropper on the. I believe so. Unless there is another way to do that I'm not aware of, but I believe you have to use the dropper. It also works in curves as well. That's also another way to. You can also set those points in curves, which will have a similar effect as well. So that's just a little bit on the color grading, but I'm happy with that. It's sort of like taken it out of that grade a little bit and made it look a little more normal, which will just help as well for when we put the art in, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's too bright and out of place as well. Just making it a little more natural. So to get the perspective on this one, so we've got this sort of like two of these, I guess, going on, one here and one here. We'll work on the left one first of all. So what you want to do first is to zoom in on each of the corners and just to use your guides to sort of make like a crosshair of where that artwork sort of ends. And if you hold shift while you do this as well, it snaps to a round pixel number. If you don't hold shift, you sort of get incremental pixels. So I'm just going to hold shift so we can get them on like exact pixel lines.
And why do you want to do that?
To snap them
to an exact pixel line rather than just kind of anywhere.
When we create, when we do the next part of this, we actually get artwork in like a round pixel number, which is, I guess, what we want. It's quite a bit. It's kind of tough to work in like points of pixels. It's just a little bit cleaner, I find. And if the image is large enough as well, it shouldn't be really a hassle. If you're working, I guess, with like a lower res image, it will be sort of will be difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, the round numbers, if you're working high enough res, shouldn't be an issue. Cool. So just kind of make a crosshair. We can actually overshoot like the artwork as well a little bit, and that's probably better because then you won't have, I guess, any like mask like coming out underneath. So if you want to overshoot it a little bit, it just means it will like properly cover the imagery. So we've got those two crosshairs.
So there's a question from chat about the like finding that gray. So like it's 0 to, I think it's 0 to 255.
It might be one actually. Yes, yeah.
Oh, it might be one. Sorry. And so grays are 150-ish. I guess it's grey as long as they're similar, but it's either really light grey or really dark grey. Is that right? So if you had like 50-50-50, is that a really light grey?
Yeah, it would be. And then I guess it's finding that mid. So it would actually be, I guess, between 125 and 150. I guess because halfway of sort of the 255. And then it's really just about finding them all balanced. That's really the trick, is like making sure that they're all a similar value. If you've got like the blue is like way out, then that will like affect the balance of the image, because then it will overcorrect for that. So it's just really about finding those all aligned. That you might not find the exact like middle point of all those, but I think we got one that was like sort of roughly all in the middle, and it just means all those colors get brought like back to sort of the middle point.
Nice.
Does it make sense?
Brought back in line. Yeah, it does. I think it's such a really good tip, which is why there's been some questions around it. But yeah, thanks for asking that question, Camilla.
I did learn that as well from another, from a retoucher who taught me that, and that was, I've just always like played with that with regrading it. So that came from a retoucher over to me. So maybe there needs to be another retoucher to fully explain that one in depth at one point. So we've got all our points in the corners, and like obviously it looks a little messy, but all we're looking for is like each crosshair, I guess, at each of these points. So we'll be able to find those again. And so the reason we've done that is because we're going to use this tool called the Perspective Crop Tool, which is underneath like the crop tool. So you might see crop tool in your panel, but underneath that, if you click and hold, then you get the perspective crop tool. And what this does is quite amazing, because now we can click between all of these points and it will actually snap to the points. And we're going to create this sort of netting over the image. So we've kind of got that net that's created over the artwork. We can zoom in as well and check whether or not these have all snapped, which they look like they have. Maybe that one's a little off. But you can, because it's a live sort of net, you can actually grab points still and adjust it. So you don't need to redo it if it's not exact. You can actually just pull one per one. Yeah. So we've got this netting over here now, and then what we want to do is hit the little tick up in here, which commits it. And what that does is actually give us like the artwork at its original aspect ratio and at its, like at the actual size, which is really great, because that's a really difficult part of, I guess, having skewed images, is that you don't know what the aspect ratio is. So you can't just necessarily dump it into an image and then just restretch it, because you don't know if it's going to be the right aspect ratio. So what this is actually letting us do is like, it's giving us the exact aspect ratio of what that billboard was. Yeah. So really simple, but just we now have that, which is great. And
that's the other amazing thing, I've not seen this trick before. Very cool.
I've even shocked the host. This is incredible.
Regular watchers of the show will know it's not that hard to shock you, but it's still. I know a special trick. I know a special trick when I see it.
So now we actually have like the original art, which is great. So what we want to do, but we've committed to this sort of size. So we're going to go like a little bit forward, then a little bit back. We're going to grab this art, and if we Command A and to select the whole artboard, and then Command C that to copy it. Now we're actually going to step back a little bit. And so we've like got the art in here as on top of it as like a flat item. We also want to grab this and put it into like my InDesign file. And in the InDesign file, this now means that we know like we can resize the artboard to be to that size, so we can actually make sure it's like it's going to fit exactly into it and we're not skewing it. Right. Whereas if I had just brought this in to Photoshop, you can do to show, and if I had tried to, I guess, to resize by, sorry, I've gone too many ways.
I should mention as well, I just didn't even bother to mention it for some reason, but we have a Q&A break in the middle. We've got 20 minutes for the Q&A break. You can ask questions as we're going along, as people have, about techniques and things that Stephen's using. And then in that little break, if there's any bigger questions, we'll tackle those in the Q&A break. We usually ask for about 2 or 3 questions, so you can get them in, and then we'll ask in the break. If you have any questions about design, graphic design, branding, anything that Stephen has shown so far today, any other questions you might have, shoot.
Sweet. So I've just dragged this in and just put it over the top, and because we don't know the actual size, it means that the artwork's been squished down vertically because it was like too tall for the space, which is why we need to actually find like that invisible number. Otherwise it is a real guessing game of like putting it in, re-skewing it, does it look normal? If you take out all the guessing, and now we've used that perspective crop tool and we've got like the original sort of size. So we have that, so we'll put this in here, but we'll deal with that later.
So just a quick question on the process there. How did you get that into InDesign? I missed that step. Did you copy it? Did you drag it over and Alt Tab? Did you place it in? What was the process there?
Yeah, so all I did is when I grabbed this and copied it to put it back into Photoshop, I just also brought it into InDesign and pasted it, and it just pasted as a flat graphic. So it's now embedded into InDesign. InDesign works usually with links. If I just copy paste something in, then it will just be embedded into InDesign. Yeah. Cool. But it works the same. It's on the same like clipboard. You can just bring it straight over and dump it in.
Nice.
Also, I did forget to mention in the bottom left, I do have a little plugin which shows any sort of keyboard shortcuts as well. So in case I'm sort of forgetting any or just sort of flicking around, then have a look in the left hand corner for that. So we have this, which is good, but we do actually want the right one as well over here. And there's a little, I guess, trick with the perspective crop tool, which is that if we now converted that object to a smart object, we can't use the perspective crop tool because it doesn't agree with smart objects.
Right.
So we want to find both of these at the same time, and then we'll do the smart objecting later. So for the moment, we'll just leave that one be and turn that off. And we can do the same. We can actually use these same 2 points because we want them to match up the artwork. And so we'll leave those two in place. So we do want to find this bottom corner, which is finding, it could be a little difficult because it is quite dark. But we could use just like an adjustment layer just to really bump it up quickly to see where we think the edge of this sort of billboard is, which looks like it's going to be somewhere in here. And so let's just, what do we think? Oh, actually, it may actually be up a bit higher. If we draw a line from there. Yeah, it looks like it might be up a bit higher. Potentially more up here. That's a little tough, but I don't think it will really show because it's sort of in that corner. It should be okay. And then I guess matching it over into this corner as well.
And holding down Shift during that?
Holding down Shift, yes. Oh, was I? That's a good point. After I was telling, no, I didn't. Oh, look at that.
I'm helping.
I was caught out by my own tips. No, that's good. Otherwise, I would have had an incomplete number, which would not have been fun. All right, great. After I held down Shift. So we've got those points again now, and so we're going to Perspective Crop Tool. And gonna grab all those.
And for those that may have missed it the first time, the Perspective Crop Tool is just in the toolbar to the left, just under your normal crop tool.
Under normal crop tool, yeah. This one may be a little strange. I'm a bit worried about this, yeah. So because this one's on a massive angle, I think it's skewing this one pretty wildly, which is a little concerning, but because we already know the first one and we have that one, we're going to base our art on that and then just stretch it to match this. It's a little strange, but I think it will be okay. So we're going to get rid of the brightness contrast, bring that in. It's a little skewy, but that's okay, I think, for this, because we already have this one on a much better angle. That one's just so far skewed. And in reality, you wouldn't really want to be using, if it was only the right side of that mock-up, you probably wouldn't even want to be using it anyway. It's only because we're doing these sort of like 2-panel, and we know we have already found the true dimension, which is like the left side. So we'll just forgive how skewed that second one is, and everything will be okay. It will be fine. It's a little bit of duct tape over that second skewed billboard. So from here, we've got these, but now we want to turn them into smart objects. So I'm going to just rename these because I'm on camera.
Yep. You get in trouble if you don't label your layers when people are watching.
And now we're going to turn them into smart objects. So smart objects just means that we can go into that and change the artwork over it. Doesn't matter what we do to it, it's going to like retain its integrity. So we've got this smart object. So if we Command T to bring up the transform options, and then if you hold Command on each of the corners, because usually if you don't, then it's all about resizing. If you hold Command, you can just affect each of these per the corner. So it will look a little strange, but
and are they snapping to those points, or do you need to go in and...
They aren't on these
carefully?
ones, so these I will need to go in. So just get those in place. And again, it won't matter too much if they're, because I guess the image is so huge. If they overshoot it a little bit, that's probably better. And the perspective, because it will be such a minor sort of part, like angle, it won't be like a huge issue if they're not exact. And in fact, it's probably better to go a little bit over. And because they're all smart objects, you can change them later anyway, so it's not an issue. So we've got all those in place, so just enter. And so if we flick those on and off, you can't even really see it shifting around, which is great, which is what we want.
Is that something that you will do when you do a mock-up? Like if there's already something there, is to do it exactly in the way you did, just to see is there any difference like between when it's on?
Yeah, I always like doing that, just to turn off, like to show something, just so you know that it's like either it's exact, or maybe if you're trying to change like a color grade or something, I like to just turn the layer on and off, because then you can just see what you've actually done. It's just a little bit easier. But yeah, that one looks like pretty close. So it might have shifted like a tiny bit, but maybe not even at all. So we've got that left one in, which is great. And the right problem child, we will do the same thing.
There's always one.
Exactly.
There was a question about this one from Damien. Could you now base a further horizontal distort on knowing that the Spotify logo is circular?
Go again, what's the question?
Could you now base a further horizontal distort on knowing that the Spotify logo is circular?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that's true. You could do that. Maybe I'll try that. Let's see what that does. That's a great call. Damien, get on the live stream. You're up. Oh, wait, but I'll do that before I turn it into a smart object.
Because I guess you're not always going to have that reference, right? Like we know the Spotify logo is a circle, but if you didn't have it there, then you wouldn't be able to go off anything else.
No, that's true. And that's why I only ever work over mockups that already have Spotify work in them. That's
just exclusively Spotify advertising.
No, that's a good call. It would be hard. I guess though, the left mockup of this, like the left billboard, is a more like ideal version where the perspective crop works really well because it's not as skewed. I guess this right one, it's on such a strange angle that maybe if one of the points was off, it's like now done this reskew. But yeah, I think the circle thing is actually, that's a really good call. Thanks, Damien.
Nice one.
Your check's in the mail. All right, so now we've got that as a
What a name, Lil Uzi. Yeah,
Lil Uzi.
I think I'm gonna have to go away and listen to some Lil Uzi this afternoon just to get a vibe.
Yeah, he could have. He should have been the soundtrack.
Less than 10 minutes to Q&A break, everybody. Let us know what you want to know about Lil Uzi. Origins. We're here to answer your Hamilton questions.
Favorite songs. Yeah, we are actually. Yeah, that is actually true. That's not a lie. Me and Flynn are both very passionate. So any Hamilton questions, please forward them on.
Get them in chat.
So now we've got these both as smart objects, which is good. They look like they're pretty much over the exact same place, which is great. We are going to jump back into InDesign and grab artwork now. So we know that the artwork size, and we're going to work over the Lil Uzi Vert one, is the dimensions in here. So when we've got that selected, we know the height is 2186. So like this underneath it to be that as well, so it matches. I like doing it using the page tool, super quick. Copy paste that number in there, and then we're going to get the width as well. Pretty close. So we don't need that anymore, but we now have like the new size, which you can just adjust our art to. Yeah, and it can be good because some of those billboards, they come in such different sizes depending. So just being able to find that again, and then, you know, adjusting your artwork to fit it. And then it means, yeah, if you are doing it over again in the future, you already know, what that dimension is, so you can just actually just start by designing to that size specifically. So we've got our art now. Just Command A, select it all, copied it, and because it's vector, it is fine to copy back into Photoshop. And we're going to go into the left billboard, so double clicking the thumbnail. And we've got the art again, which is great. And then we're just going to copy paste that over the top. Underneath layer, save that. And then if we go back into that photo, we've got that perfectly placed and into the right perspective on top of that.
Nice.
And now we're going to repeat the same thing for a second. I might just duplicate that to grab those variations. Billboard. We're going to do the same thing. It looks like it's really close, but there is a bit of overhang on the right because it's not as exact, I guess, this second one. But we know because it is the same like proportion. I'm just going to give it a little horizontal stretch, and I'm holding Shift and Option. So Option stretches from the middle, Shift it will break, otherwise it will scale proportionally. So we're only going for the horizontal. And so now we've got that in there. And because it's on that angle, I think it is sort of covering up any like weirdness on that front. And to me, that looks, like it's doing the right things, which is great.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
We got them
so in theory, you could save that, and then you can drop anything into that InDesign file, and then it will pop up.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So now I guess we can do some of the other stuff that we worked on the first one, which is like adding a bit of like the blur, desaturating them a little bit, adding in some sort of shadowing and light sources as well. So we can do like a little quick refresher on that of my favorite little recipe, which is adding a bit of Gaussian blur. Because it's quite large, we can probably add like a little bit. And you can actually see on the image itself, like how noisy this image is. And I think that's to do as well with that original grade on the image. It is really quite, gritty. Yeah. So we'll definitely want to add a bit of that in. So we've got a bit of the blur, adding on the unsharp mask, so it's like blurring it, kind of crunching it a little bit more to get some of those like artifacting around the details, which is all, breaking it and then remaking it.
I thought for a second, I have to tell you because I'm laughing about it myself, but when you did the drop down and selected that, I thought I didn't read sharpen, I read Steven, and I thought you'd like created your own like drop down. Wow, how'd you do
That's
that?
a good idea.
little Steven drop down.
So if you go to the Steven menu in your Photoshop,
yours will be called something different, whatever your name is.
And then the final is to add some noise onto that. So we can add like quite a bit, I think, onto that. The noise, I think, is a little different because on the photo it's like it's a bit larger, the actual grain size, but I think it's fine for the purpose of this.
That's so great. So just really quickly, you were just comparing like what the noise is of the original image, and then zoomed in really close, and then you're just adding this so it's as close as possible to the background.
Yeah, and I always add noise anyway to mock-ups, and if they're in photos, there just naturally is grain in like pretty much all photography. This one especially though has like extra noise in it, so we can easily just like match those two. So we've got all those effects applied to that left one, and we need them on the right as well. A really quick way to bring all these smart layers onto the other one is to hold Option and to click on the top smart filter layer. And if you bring that on there, it duplicates them all. And so now we have them on both. If you just drag them without holding Option, you just move them to that one and take them off the left. So holding Option is sort of the duplicate function for Smart Filter. And then we just have, we don't need to worry about going back through that process as well. That will all be the same. I think one thing now though we can see is because we've blurred them a little bit, it's created like this little black strip in the middle, which we don't really want. But because we've created them as smart objects, we can just readjust those to sort of cover up, I guess, that little line in the middle. So I've just Command T'd it again, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of overlap, and it's going to reapply all those. So, and I might do it on the grey. Just to make sure they don't create that little sort of pixely line in the middle. So now they actually meet up in the middle, which is good. So we have these. They are really intense, and they've still got that flat sort of color in them, which I'm finding a little intense. So because we're working with two, it's obviously hard to to affect them both at the same time, because then you get into this thing of needing to grade one then grade the other. So what I'm going to do is group these two together. And then if I create any adjustment layers, I can clip those to the group, which is really great. So it's they actually only will affect just everything that's in that group, which I really love. So the shortcut for that, which I also enjoy, is Command Option G. And now you can see we've got the little arrow, which is making sure it only affects the artwork. And the other way, of course, to do a clipping mask is to right click it and to create a clipping mask. So it's only affecting those two layers. So the color is super RGB and way too intense. So I want to desaturate that a little bit, just to bring it back into the real world a bit. We could have a play with the lightness, just to sort of give it that. What I like now is that this because we desaturated it, changed the lightness. This solid block of sort of white is now a gray, which is truer to the photo as well. And also the other thing is all that sort of color grading stuff we did at the beginning, if you put those over the top, at the very top of like the file, they're going to affect everything underneath it as well. So anything that you put in there is also starting to get like pick up that grade, and like it's all tonally going to start sort of fitting within that image. So all of that stuff at the beginning just like helps unify those and actually make them feel a little bit more like they're in the space.
Yeah. Hey, so letting you know, we're at our Q&A break. We can take it. We don't have to take it right now. We can take it like in 5 minutes if you want to. If you want to keep it up, it's up to you.
Let's do it in 5 minutes. I reckon we're pretty close to finishing this one up. Nice. So the only other thing I want to do on this now is to like add on a little bit of like a gradient from top to bottom. We talked about this last time as well. There is, I guess, objects in the real world again do have a light source from the top usually, which is either lights or from the sun, and so there is that sort of natural sort of gradient that appears on color, and you rarely see, I guess, like flat color from top to bottom. So we just want to sort of mimic that a little bit, and so we can create a new layer, and using the gradient tool, I think, is a really simple way to do it. You can just create a really simple like white to a feathered gradient, and we can just insert that over the top. It's really intense, but that's okay. So again, we'll clip this to these objects. So we've got them on there, and then if we want to change like the blending mode, we could do like an overlay, which is just a more sort of, it affects the colors. It's not just white hitting on top of it. It actually does interact with the color, which I quite like for sort of the white sort of hue. But again, it's really intense. So we could still sort of knock that down. I'm just using the numbers in the keyboard, and each number correlates to like a 10 step in the opacity. So 3 is 30, 4 is 40, etc. And then the one final thing on this is that these feel a little bit like you can see on this building actually how this side is sort of lighter, and on this side it's actually quite a bit darker. And over here it gets like really dark into this. So like we kind of want to replicate
the building itself.
The building, yeah. Yes. We kind of want to replicate that a little bit because it does feel like a bit intense to have it all like as such a bright color over here. Even though it's probably like a digital screen. Well, I think it is a digital screen, so it's probably okay. But I'm just going to do a really quick sort of like gradient on that side, which is going to be masked to that object. So just changing it to black though, and making sure to change both of the colors and the feather as well to black. And if we just do a little gradient here, clip it to this side as well, and we can change that to multiplier. If we just sort of knock that back as well. You could get more particular, I guess, with like coloring, like it could be more of a tonal gradient, like it could be a darker green that you make that color. So it feels like it's actually a bit richer, I guess. It's not like a black necessarily. Yeah. But it just gives it a bit of separation from this left one as well. It's not like a clear line. There is sort of a different shadowing going on. Yeah, that's sort of just to kind of match it to like the natural lighting around it as well. So that's sort of, getting that perspective mock-up and two working together. There are lots of other ways you could sort of play with the lighting in here. But I think that's it on this one, I think, for now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so good. Like, I love that you create your original work and then you can just dump it in, like the idea of not working in a destructive sense. So you could do this with, like, obviously putting something straight into Photoshop, getting it all in there and adding all those layers to it. But what you've done is you've set yourself up that you can just put anything in that InDesign file, and then it'll pop in and it's all been color graded, specifically in perspective for this particular mock-up, which is really cool. So your original is just still there, like your original is just pure.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. And I love not working in like a destructive way in Photoshop. It just saves you so much hassle, and the amount of times I've recreated images or had to go back and like find an undo, or I saved over something, like working with smart objects and especially adjustment layers, so you can actually tweak them as opposed to just doing it raw onto the file. It just saves you so much hassle, and it means everything's like editable, you know?
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's answer a couple of questions. There were some that came up that I thought I'd hang on to for this little break, and then we'll jump in quickly to part two. Camilla's asking, how do you apply a perspective cut tool on rounded banners? Is this like an infinitely harder technique to use if it's rounded at all, or?
Honestly, I have not gotten into the round space. I think that you were doing a great series on, remind me what the software is called, that does do more rounded objects, so you can get into like cans and bottles.
Right.
I'm blanking on the name right now. You have to Dimension. But
yeah.
what is that the name of the software?
Yeah.
Yes, great. Yeah, so there are other Adobe tools for that. I think in Photoshop, I'm sorry, I can't help you on that front. There is, I guess, ways that you could do it in terms of like using a warp tool, because you can do, when you do have a transform, like there are lots of properties in the transform for like doing things like a warp, where you do actually get points, you know, to do that sort of thing. I guess what I like about using like the perspective crop tool is that it is like it's an exact thing that you can measure out, and it gives you the aspect ratio. What's difficult using the warp is that you're not matching it exactly. It's much more by eye. So I don't have I don't have like an exact way to do that as well. But I think things like Dimension could potentially help you on that front, because that does get more into like, I guess, combining like mockups with more of like 3D technology, and it's not necessarily eyeballing it in the way that something like the warp tool does require. Yeah.
Cool. Let's make our heads big again. Festus was asking before, what is the material on the billboard that projects the light so well? It's in cubes. Yeah, I think we thought that it was a digital projection, so we kind of talked about it.
I think the cubes, they're probably some sort of like, because I assume it is a screen, right? So then there must just be some sort of like, there might be like large LEDs or something in that original image. I can't actually really tell, but it does look like it's segmented. So maybe that's like another thing. You could overlay like some sort of grid onto your art to make it look like it's kind of got that like LED like feature
like
to it. That could be
kind of thing over the top.
Yeah.
Festus, do the people that live behind that ball get rent reduction for their windows being blocked? Possibly. I don't know if we can answer that, but yeah.
They get free Spotify.
So yeah, free Spotify. Lil Uzi just free around the clock. For sure. There was another question around with working with a design studio, how often are you creating mock-ups?
We use them, I think, really like twice in a job, which is like the first time to sell in a job to like in the concept phase. So if we're working on like, you know, brand or a campaign or something, and it's sort of trying to sell in the visuals, we will definitely use mock-ups to like get work over the line. And then the other time in a job we use it is like to case study it and show it to the world. Once it's actually like finished, then we can, we sort of like loop back around, and whatever got approved, we can like create those as like new mock-ups. And so yeah, it's sort of like twofold.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And do you always create like a new mock-up for a new project? Or do you have a library and you use them as, I guess, especially at the pitch stage, you're like, cool, this is definitely, here's where this brand or this campaign would look in the real world. Here it is on a bus, here it is here. But then if you got towards the very end, you might want to mock up something unique for that client, I guess, if you get it all the way over the line.
Yeah, we do reuse things over over multiple jobs. If you, I guess, do an Easter egg hunt on the Christopher Doyle Co website, you'll probably find some repeated mock-ups. We don't sort of mind that too much. I think what we do like is that we have created them for ourselves though. So a lot of them are like custom, I guess, to us. So even though we repeat them, often they're not really like out in the world in general. So we don't feel like that's, they are still, I guess, our IP. We just like to repeat them. It would be pretty hard to recreate, like do mock-ups each time for each new job.
Right. Yeah.
The ideal is that you just can get things photographed and documented, but as we all know, that's like not always feasible within a budget.
Yeah. And final question: who is your favorite character in Hamilton, and why is it King George?
That's your favorite character, and you're putting words into my mouth. No, I don't think. I think it's actually Aaron Burr. So, sort of a villain, but also sympathetic.
Very good character development, obviously.
Yeah.
Good. Well, so this doesn't just turn into half an hour of us talking about musicals. Should we jump into part 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right.
So, part 2, we're going to get away from the perspective mock-up a little bit, and just look into something a little like simpler, which again is like a great promotional tool, which is just doing a really simple like flat lay of objects for Flyn Tracy, which I'm pushing him to start a production company, and he will by the end of it, because I'm already halfway there. I've already got the mock-ups.
I'm like 50-50 if my website is even up at the moment.
It is. I checked. So go and hire Flyn Tracy Productions. So really simple, little like I guess quick tips for this one, to sort of close this out for 30 minutes. So what I've started with is in InDesign again. I do like to work in InDesign. We do as a studio. We sort of like prefer it in terms of creating art, because often things have to turn into print, and so it sort of makes sense that you start in something
right
that is just great for print. Photoshop as well doesn't have the same, I guess, type capabilities that InDesign has, because Photoshop, per its name, is primarily a great photo editor, but in terms of like copy, typography, and that sort of thing, we find that like InDesign just has really powerful tools for that, all that stuff. So what I've done here is created a few business cards. I changed the palette. I am going to have to represent the work to you, Flynn, because I've done a palette change.
I don't remember signing off on these colors.
And also what I've done here, and then this is just some little InDesign things as well, is working within the same file, but changing the size of each of the spreads, which can just be a really easy way to sort of work on a few print things at a time. So instead of saving different files for like each business card, each letterhead or like a comp slip or something, working within the same one, and again using that page tool to change each of the spread sizes, so you can just work within one. Similar to, I guess, how now like Photoshop does allow for artboards, and XD has artboards. You can just find it really handy to like keep that within the same file, and you can copy things across. So again, because it's all vector, we're going to copy things over pretty easily. I'm just going to create a new file. So we just have a white artboard. We're going to create a little background for this, so it's not just sitting all on white. You can see here I've got sort of this grey background, and in here I've also like given it some noise as well, like it's got a little bit of grey in. So creating a new layer, Command-Shift-N. I'm going to use a gradient tool again, because we want to give it that top to bottom lighting, so it's not all flat. And it's going to be a lot subtler though, like it's going to be sort of like a mid grey, so the white still pops off of the grey, but it's not going to be like super intense. Do we know which direction I've drawn it in? I've drawn it in the wrong direction. So we're going to go bottom to top, so it's got this grad through it. Yeah. Double checking that was even. So we've got that as like just a grad. I might just draw it a little bit better.
So it's just a really, really light grey gradient.
Yeah, it just goes from dark to light at the top. It just super subtle. Just gives it a color change across. And we're going to give that some noise. Make some noise.
Make some noise.
Give it like 5. That's sort of quite nice and subtle, but it's enough to sort of give it something. So we've got that as our background, which is good. Going back into now, pop each of these. They're going to be probably tiny because we're also working from like millimeters to pixels, so the translation isn't always there. But because the vector, we can just scale these up, which is the benefit, I guess, of working in something like InDesign, because it's a vector-based program as well. On these ones, I've just got a white background on them so that it actually copies something and it keeps its like aspect ratio. So we've got all of our assets, Flyn. I'll just move over here. So now we can like sort of do like a little arrangement on the page, but we want to scale these up as well. So like holding Alt, so we can scale those from the middle. So we've got page now. So we just have all of these. So we want to do like a little arrangement, and because we've got smart guides turned on, which if you don't have them on, snap to, then yeah, you can turn on all your snapping, and then they behave like, I guess, smart guides in Illustrator. And so everything, we just know that these are aligned. And we can do a little like fun arrangement. What I am going to do as well is step out the, like, so they all have even gaps on them. So I'm going to grab, holding Shift, and grab all of these items and move them so they hit that. And then if I hold Shift and do my arrow keys in Photoshop, one tap of an arrow key is 1 pixel, and then if you hold Shift, then you it's going to jump 10 at a time. So I need to keep count of how many we're doing. 4.
I do the counting thing. I often do the counting thing and wonder if anybody else does that, like the Shift, cross, 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 down, down, down. Then I'm like, right, that was 4 across and 4 down. Then do it again, do it again.
Yeah, it's the military march. You've got to do it. You have to remember. Also, if you're ever listening to music and doing it, I sometimes find on the beats handy. If I don't do it on the beat, then I get confused, and then I'm like lost what's going on, especially when I'm listening to Lil Uzi.
Lil Uzi in the background, yep.
Yeah. So we've got all these just laid out, and I'm just going to center that just to find that middle point, which should hit magenta. Yep, when it has. So we've got all of these items sort of arranged. This background, like you can see it really clearly now, I guess, because we have like a white contrast. So we could even like knock that back a little bit just to give it a little bit of and make it a little more subtle. So we've got all the things arranged which we like, and now we want to add like some sort of drop shadow. So there is, I guess, 2 ways to do it. The one is to grab the object, and maybe because everyone's watching, I'll change the names as well. So 2 ways to do it. One is,
what will my productions be?
Well, well, maybe you could stage Hamilton. Like maybe that's the first production you put on.
Flyn Tracy presents. This is a totally original idea. All my idea.
Yeah. But you doing every character as well.
Wow.
Like that would be amazing. So the two ways to do the drop shadows. One is to double click a layer, and you can use the drop shadow like function, which is good, and we will actually still use, but we want to do a slightly different way, because the thing with using a drop shadow in using like layer styles is that it replicates the layer size exactly, and sort of gives it like a Gaussian blur essentially. So it's working within those layer confines, whereas we want to like be able to sort of control the drop shadow independently of the object. So we're going to like leave that for now and actually just create another layer, which will become our sort of our shadow layer, which sounds very dark. And so we'll just make it black. It can sort of be any size, and we can always grab but what we're doing is like insetting it, so it's not we can like control this separately, and it won't be visible as well. So we can align that to that top layer if we grab both of those, and we can align those here. And because the letterhead is a bigger object, the internal object will just snap to the middle of that.
Right. So whichever is the biggest object, if you're selecting those two, it's going to always snap the smaller one to the bigger one. Is that the case?
Within that, yeah. If they're overhanging, then it splits the difference. And they're both going to like move over. So now, like, because that one was overhanging, whereas if it's actually just like internal, it will just sort of align, which is like really handy for this part of it, because we need to like, if we just want to make sure it's always sitting in the middle.
That's cool. That's quite a hidden UI element. I didn't actually know that was the case. Again, another thing that you've taught me. Because you need to know, you need to know that there's nothing indicating, there's nothing telling you that. Like that's something you kind of have to figure out yourself or learn somewhere like this. So if it's overlapping, it's that back one is gonna remain in place. Very good tip.
Yeah. In InDesign, it is a little different with the align tools. There are a few more tools in here where you can actually select like the alignment that you want to do. So it could be like align it to the selection, which will do the same sort of thing. But you can actually do in InDesign, this is not what you asked for, but this is what you're getting. If you have two things selected and you click one of them, you get this sort of line around it. And that is actually then the key object, and then everything will align to that. So then if I center that object, that's going to go to that. If I go left, it's going to go to that object. So there is a few more in InDesign, even like just to play with if you do use between both of them. In Photoshop, it behaves like the selection version of that. So if it's internal, it will snap. If it's overhanging, it will split the difference. Cool. So the shadow that we're going to affect on here is, now we're doing the same thing. So we're double clicking that, we're going into the drop shadow, but because we've got them as like separate layers, we just have more control over like how that appears. So we can put it behind the letter now. And go back into here, and now so we can, if we start to bump up these sort of numbers, we can see this appearing as well, and we can add like distance or blur it out with some size. What's really nice though is that it actually feels like it's sort of elevated. If you can imagine like on a tabletop, if you've put objects underneath, like blocks almost underneath the sheet, and put it on top, you would actually get a similar drop shadow to this. It actually feels like it's sort of lifted or like elevated off it. Yeah, it does, yeah. So it's super simple, but it just means we can control that. And so you could do like more intense versions of that shadow.
Yeah, so that just when you shrunk it down the size a little bit, it kind of looked like the paper was like even a little bit higher, like hovering even higher, right?
Yes, yeah. And so you just have those as separate objects, which is really handy to and then I guess the more you get out to the edges, you kind of get those like horizontal shadows as well, but we probably want them more like internal. Yeah, so we've kind of got that now, which is really nice. And then on the letter overall, we will give it like a bit of a drop shadow, but it will just be really subtle, just to sort of give it a bit of distinction around like the edge of the paper, but really simple, not nowhere near what we've got there. So the three different here as well, I don't know if I explained. Spread is, I guess, the intensity of like the gradient almost. It's like how sharp that is. And if you go right up to the top, it will just almost, it's like fully rounded out. That's kind of like closing up the gradient altogether. The size is sort of what it says on the packet, which is literally the pixel sort of space that takes up. And then the distance is how far away from the object that's going to sit. And that's also affected by this global light tool. So if you have the distance set quite high, but the light's coming from the top, obviously that's going to sit, and then you can just sort of see how that changes with the angles that you affect as well. So we're going to just turn all these back down.
Bring that back a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what your taste is, but yeah, it's a bit much for it. And then because we just want it really subtle, we can just we can make it really like nothingy. It's really to make it, just give it a little bit of like this edge over here, like a little bit of distinction. And again, just flicking that on and off, it's so subtle, but it's just to give it a bit of something. So we've got this bottom shadow now, and and then this outer one. So I'm going to quickly just duplicate that onto all of these, and then I'll just do another sort of lighting effect on these, but I'll just copy all these across. So copying, if you right click it, you can copy that exact layer style, and then we can just paste those onto each of them.
Nice. And letting you guys know we've got like 12 minutes left or so. So if you do have any questions, don't give away your shot.
So duplicating the shadow layer, which I do with Command J, is the duplicate command. J stands for duplicate. And again, aligning these. One thing on these, when you are doing these shadows and bringing them over, is having all of those all of the snapping turned on in Photoshop just really saves a lot of hassle with this, because it means that you can align these things really easily. And because you just get little like hints where, you're getting these sort of magenta lines, which are saying it's going to be like vertically aligned through those.
And is that shadow a smart object?
It is. No, it's just a path. It's just a rectangle path. Yeah. So we don't need it to be a smart object, because it's not really.
It's not an image or something.
No, and it could actually be anything like that. Could really be. yeah, it actually doesn't even matter what the content of it is. We're only using it just purely as like a placeholder for like the shadow effect that we put on it. So if you really want, you could have a little Easter egg and put a funny image behind it, and no one would know.
Nice.
I am doing the military march again because we're going to like duplicate that on multiple these. And one thing here, if you're doing multiple things close together, I always put all of the art at the top and then all of the shadows at the bottom. And the reason for that is that if I put them right underneath each of the art layer, then it might actually affect like this one underneath it here, because it's now actually in the order above that one. And in reality, we don't want them to feel like they're, in this instance, we don't want them to feel like they're on top of each other. So if we put them all behind, like all the shadowing will be behind all of those images.
Right. That's to stop the shadow from going on top of the business card below it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because in this context, they're actually all at an equal level. Yeah. So now all these things have little floaty shadows on them, which we like. And then the final thing we're going to do on this is give it a bit of that texture again. So using that background layer that we already created, we're going to duplicate that and bring it to the top. And the reason I want this now is because it's got a gradient in it and it has noise in it as well. And so they're the things that we were talking about in the first half of this. You know, we want to add like natural lighting to it. We want to add a bit of distortion. So we're going to actually use that. Now that everything's in place, we're going to grab all this and just mask on that image at the top. So if you hold Command and Shift at the same time and you click on all of the layers, so the letterhead, the comps and the business cards, you'll get all these little running ants around each of them. So if you click on here, you get the outline selected.
You're just holding down Shift?
Sorry, Shift and Command. So Command and click actually is the one that will select it. The Shift means you can do multiple at a time. So Shift is like additive. Yeah. So you can keep on like selecting multiple objects, which for this is what we want. So we've got all these running ants selected around this, and because we want to mask it, we can use this little layer mask tool here. And now they're only going to be affecting those layers. And so we can change the effect on the layer to be multiplier. And you can sort of play around, I guess, with the opacity again. And so what this is doing is just giving it like that lighting from top to bottom. So you can see on like the letterhead here at the top, it's a lot lighter down the bottom here. It's not just like a flat color anymore. And if we were to zoom in on this, everything now has like a little bit of noise to it as well. So, and that could be, you could do that in, you could create like a separate one. We just use the background layer at the same, in the same way. But it could be, you could put any sort of like texture over the top of that. Even just having some sort of like paper texture just really helps to give it like a sort of a real feel. And then now that all these things are like created independently. So really, again, it's like another one of those that you could repurpose for different things, or you could even make like a darker background. You know, if you wanted to have like a more of a like mono-y look as well. But still giving it like, you know, they still have shadows on them and there's still noise within the imagery, but then you just have like a full set of stuff. Yeah.
That's super cool.
So I think that's sort of, like a really simple little overview on like how to get a little stationery set, which again, we use all the time, both in presentation and like case study work as well.
Yeah, awesome. Oh man, I love it so much. And again, like just working in a way where, you know, you can just drop in the artwork. So if you needed to use it on multiple projects, if you're using it at pitching stage, that non-destructive approach that you can just pop things in, and then move on. You're kind of setting yourself up to save yourself time down the track, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think all these things as well, what's really great is that how you can just iterate these over time. Like we often see what it is that other studios present their work, or we see stuff on Instagram, and there's just so much inspiration out there, I guess, of like new ideas and new ways to present work. And so you can just build on it over time and sort of like find your own little niche within it, or, you know, your own sort of style of how you present work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, awesome. Well, should we just quickly have a look back at what you showed us before, just to do a quick little recap?
Yeah, we can. So in the first half of this, we created this little 2 billboard sort of mock-up on perspective. And the one big trick that blew Flynn away was using this perspective crop tool, which lives underneath the normal crop tool. And what we did on the original image was creating sort of these points where we could snap this to, see, now it doesn't like us. Creating these 4 points, and you can use any sort of image that you've gotten from sort of supplied photography, and then making that into like a usable mock-up. And so we can grab this image and turn it into something to repurpose.
Yeah,
it's great.
Super cool. Yeah, it's really cool. There was something else that we wanted to do a bit of a shout out as well, was the Christopher Doyle Co posters as well, which just came out. We thought, what a cool time to share those.
Yeah.
So I think Johannes just going to share them in chat, but maybe you could just quickly tell us about that before we run out of time. What do you think?
Yes. So Foremost is a little publishing house in Sydney, and they've just published a book called 49 Posters, which is, just a bunch of work from our studio that covers there's some Spotify stuff in that, a lot of arts clients, and some stuff we've made for the studio as well. So that's just brand new out in the world, and it's very exciting to have the work in print, an actual print, not a mock-up of print.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I didn't realize this, but I just had a quick look myself, and I noticed that the brand identity guidelines are up there, which I don't think they've been printed for a really long time. But for those of you who don't know, Chris Doyle in 2008 did like a brand guideline book, but about himself. It's like really funny, and I think it got a ton of press, like back in the day. So I think I saw it online like hundreds of times before I even met Chris. So that's really fun. Definitely check that out if that's the sort of thing that you're interested in. I'm sure it's a beautiful print if it was done by Foremost. So check that out.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I always learn something new every time we're hanging out, and it's always just heaps of fun.
Oh, awesome! Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
And thanks, chat. So that's it for this week. We hope you have a really wonderful weekend wherever you are. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week with some more Adobe Live. Thanks again, Stephen.
It's Hamilton.
I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.